Good morning and welcome to the second in the Thomas Frost Executive Conversation series. Today I'm joined by Brendan Drake, formerly of NAB, ANZ and Macquarie Glory in Australia and Bank of Scotland and Barclays fame in the UK. Brendan's been a friendly face for Thomas Frost for many years, and whilst we were sad to see him leave our shores back at the beginning of 2018, we've watched with interest as he embarks on his new journey with Hotel Chocolat in the US. Brendan, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Hugh, and appreciate you having me.
Not at all. Could you tell us a bit about Hotel Chocolat and your journey from banker to international chocolatier?
Yeah, so as you said, I most recently, before leaving Australia, was with Macquarie, and that was at the end of 2017. So my wife took a job with Salesforce here in New York, and so that led to us moving to the US. And so arrived in the US, I lined up a job with Macquarie here in New York. But at the same time, the chairman of Hotel Chocolat reached out to me and just said, look, we're looking to roll out Hotel Chocolat in the US. Would you be interested in potentially leading that rollout? So I said to him, look, I've got a letter of offer from Macquarie in front of me. He said, well, before you sign that, can you just fly over, meet the board of Hotel Chocolat in London, which I did. And to be honest, it all stemmed from there. So really like the management team, like the values and the philosophy of the management team and what they're looking to build and what they stand for. And so that was December 2017. And here we are, 2.5 years or a bit more later now.
Yeah. For those that aren't familiar with Hotel Chocolat, can you just give us a broad snapshot of the business and its footprint?
Yeah. So yeah, Hotel Chocolat, it's about 120 stores in the UK. I think there's about 7 or 8 now in Japan. In the US, we opened 4 in the first 12 months. So we opened our first one December 2018. And then obviously once the pandemic began, or commenced in around March 2020, temporarily closed those locations. So as a business, it's around about 130, 35 stores across the world, but certainly continuing to grow. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but each of our businesses have had to pivot rapidly online in recent months.
Yeah. So having had a stellar career in banking and financial services across a couple of continents,
you don't have to talk it up too much.
What disciplines or knowledge do you think you've taken from that world with you into this world that's either given you an advantage or at least helped you navigate your way through?
Yeah, and I think the biggest ones are actually from my time I spent in the UK. And in particular, I think of, so Andrew Geary was previously with Lush Cosmetics, and I think of someone like Mike Ashley, who was at Sports Direct, and these types of people. Like, you learn a lot from these entrepreneurs and working closely with them. And so I think it was those things that they were doing within their businesses that I was analysing at the time, working in my role at Barclays or Bank of Scotland, whoever it was. And then that's what has led to this opportunity, because I guess Andrew saw me, helping problem solve with those guys. And that was through sort of 2008, 2009, the financial crisis, which has not been too dissimilar to what we're going through at the moment. And so really what you're trying to do is protect the downside risk in all of that. And I think that's very much the philosophy and the approach that we took when we started Hotel Chocolat in the US. And that's protecting the downside risk, whether it's entering into leases with landlords, entering into, or when you're trying and testing new things, new products, it could be marketing, any of those things. So I think in terms of banking, it was just working closely with those entrepreneurs and then knowing what are the specific pain points that they're feeling, and then sort of living that out myself in the last couple of years.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned the GFC and your experiences through that, and then you bolt on the experiences of the last 6 months or so during this pandemic. What lessons have you learned, would you say, from the previous crisis and then this crisis? And what, with the benefit of hindsight, looking back now at the last 6 months, are there things that you would have done differently or done sooner or to a lesser or greater extent?
I mean, I think that, you're never going to get it right. And hindsight is a beautiful thing. You can always do something differently in hindsight.
Philosophize about, yeah.
Yeah. I think what we would have done differently in our current position is we were very much store focused when we launched in the US, and we ideally would have been much more digital focused, but we had to very quickly pivot. And thankfully, we've been able to do that successfully, and we'll continue to ramp that up now. So I guess the biggest learning would have been we should have been much more advanced in our digital focus. So instead of being, say, 80-90% store focused, we'll end up being the other way around.
Do you think there was a journey that you were
Yep.
already on, but this has accelerated it? I mean, the last conversation I had, we touched on the concept of accelerated adaptation. So, perhaps where the world would have been in 5 years' time with its digital presence and its ability to distribute or to operate remotely, that 5 years has become a 6-month window. Was it a journey you were on? This is accelerated, or is it a different strategy, do you think?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that the thing that's made Hotel Chocolat successful, certainly in the UK, is being very close to commuters. And so one of the big things that's going to change now is how many people will continue to work from home long term. And that could be a structural change that impacts not just retail, but a whole host of businesses.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's the one thing that a lot of people potentially couldn't predict. And that's the one thing that we still don't know for certain how that's going to play out. So yes, we were looking to become more digital, but we would have looked to have had a lot of stores off the basis that the UK Hotel Chocolat model had been very successful around commuter locations, and 3 of our first 4 stores were all around commuter locations as well, and they've obviously been hit hardest at the moment. So,
okay. A couple of weeks ago in Australia, Ross McEwen restructured NAB, or announced a restructure that was coming through mid-pandemic. That'll result in up to 2,500 people having to reapply for their jobs, and potentially up to 400 people being made redundant mid-pandemic. It's a tough call to make. How do you weigh up the needs of shareholders, staff, and customers? To me, it can often seem like a series of diametrically opposed trade-offs where you provide support to your staff, but that's at the cost of shareholders, or vice versa. What frameworks have you put in place to hold yourself to account when weighing up a socially responsible and sustainable balance between staff, customers, and shareholders?
Yeah. I mean, it's an excellent question. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, the reality is we had to let go a lot of people, which, I mean, that responsibility sits very heavily with me. So it's all on my shoulders, and that you're playing with people's livelihoods. And so I don't know what the date was, but I remember having one meeting after another that day, and unfortunately having to pass that news on to a lot of people. So there's no easy way to do that. But to your point, you've got to do that for the rest of the business. Like, you have to be able to keep the rest of the business going and viable, and you're quickly trying to work things out on your feet and pivot to more of an online strategy from a store strategy. So I think you're right. They're never going to necessarily always be the same in terms of driving or looking after the business. But at the same time, we always made sure that we tried to do the right thing by our staff. And so that would be the big thing I would say about Hotel Chocolat as a whole. It is very much a people and values first business. And so we certainly always tried to do the right thing by our team. And to be honest, there's probably a lot of people that we helped to a greater extent than I know some of our peers did as well. So as I said, it was a tough decision at the time for the betterment of the business, but it doesn't make it any easier in terms of having those conversations and then trying to make sure you do the right thing by the team members as well.
It's an unwinnable battle, I guess. You say, well, let's keep all of the staff, let's keep them all employed, but ultimately that destroys the business, erodes any residual capital, and there is no business, and everybody loses their job. So there has to be a tipping point, and then it's about trying to find, I guess you'd hope that you're aligned with the board and the chairman in terms of where that tipping point is, that we can support this many people and still sustain the business. Profit's going to take a hit, but ultimately we will get through this with as many of our team as we can to emerge out the
Yep.
other side. And at the
Yep.
same time, make the strategic decisions to support the growth of the business off that pivot, which in your case, you know, obviously is going to be far more digital in terms of its distribution channels.
No, absolutely. And as you say, it's an unwinnable battle, but yeah, like the numbers that you're talking about with NAB, whoever it may have been, are far greater, but that doesn't, I mean, there's still individuals that, in terms of the conversation we have with each person. So, and I think that probably makes it more personal for me, because you know who those people, like I know those people, whereas someone making that decision with 4,000 or 5,000 job cuts, whatever it is, perhaps doesn't know every one of those individuals. So I think it does make it a lot more personal.
You touched on Hotel Chocolat's social responsibility and its sort of overwhelming culture about doing the best by its people. Can you talk to me any more about that and how that's playing out in the States at the moment, where I think it'd be fair to say it's a fairly tumultuous environment over there?
Yeah. And I mean, this is, anyone can watch this on our Facebook or Instagram. So we, at the time of Black Lives Matters, which, sorry, is not just a one-off, but at the time of the George Floyd, and then there was a lot of, I guess, social responsibility.
There's immediate focus put back on the on the ongoing problem.
And so two of our store managers, Eric and Lisa, one is based in New York, one in Washington, DC. Both are Black and both are very proud and passionate people. And so, I mean, I learned a lot from them. I think what they helped to do was to drive change within Hotel Chocolat. And so off the back of, so we did some interviews and we put those interviews on Instagram, and I would certainly welcome anybody to watch those. They're very powerful and actually quite sad stories. But what that did was within Hotel Chocolat force some change. And now there's a anti-racism group that meets every 2 weeks. And off the back of that, there's increased diversity and inclusion training. And so I think we've driven, and so it took a lot of courage on our behalf to put ourselves out there. You can put yourself out there for ridicule. Or
you'll always find somebody that vehemently disagrees and has got a loud voice.
Yeah, but the support was excellent. And so that's driven a lot of change, as I said, within the business. I think Eric and Lisa in particular should be very proud of the way that they have conducted themselves and continue. And I think they've led by example of being great advocates for our business. So, but as a business, I think that's a great example where we gave them a platform for their voice, and then they've been able to affect change within the business overall.
Yeah, fantastic. Have you had any particular concerns around events happening to the business or within the business that haven't eventuated or haven't eventuated yet? I guess, have you got preparatory plans in place for if or when that you haven't had to execute on?
And this is public knowledge. Hotel Chocolat is a public listed company. So Hotel Chocolat raised, I think it was 22 million sterling at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think also bank funding at the same time. So effectively provided capacity if this were to go on longer than it needed to. But some of those funds have been earmarked for international growth. So I think on our side, if we needed to tap into those resources, we could. I think we've done what we needed to in terms of right size the team appropriately and then pivoted to digital. But I mean, in terms of finance, I guess that's the first thing that springs to mind that we could tap into if we needed to.
It's there, but you haven't had to use it. And hopefully when you do use it, it'll be for growth and expansion, not for survival.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, and I think that's the great thing from the Hotel Chocolat side is that we've got a product that is still giftable all year round. And particularly at the moment, we're seeing that people still want to treat themselves or treat others or provide a gift to others. So thankfully, we've done quite well during this period of time.
Have your supply chains been impacted greatly in any particular measure?
No, absolutely. So Hotel Chocolat produces or manufactures all of its own chocolate in the UK. And so we had to shut down the manufacturing plant for something like 3 to 4 months. So it's only really been turned back on in the last, 6 to 8 weeks. Okay. So that does backlog effect. And then sort of now is when you're trying to play catch up, and particularly as you're coming into the busiest time of the year, like October, November, December onwards. So yeah, no, there was a knock-on or flow-on effect of all that.
From my understanding, you have a cocoa farm in St. Lucia. What's been the operating impact for that side of the business?
Yeah, so that's only just, I think it's opening today or tomorrow, the 1st of September. So again, has probably been closed near enough 6 months. So yeah, I mean that will take probably a lot longer to come back, because then there's less people traveling at the moment. It's more difficult for them to travel. So yeah, it's every part of the business has certainly been impacted. So for Hotel Chocolat, though, not all of its cocoa comes from St. Lucia. So a large percentage still comes from Africa. So from a supply chain perspective, it's not like it's totally reliant on the cocoa coming from St. Lucia.
Slightly de-risked across your geographies. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
With the upcoming election, and without wanting to contribute to any divisiveness,
yeah,
what do you think would be a good outcome for America?
Yeah, no, look, honestly, I think that it would be great for the US if Joe Biden or the Democrats were to get in. And I've spoken about this on a recent podcast. I think one of the biggest things in the US that can be changed or should be changed is public health care. Like, a lot of people wouldn't understand or know that there is no Medicare equivalent, which is
what we take for granted is not
absolutely
a universal right.
And so, I mean, that strikes at the heart of inequality, not having access to public health care. And I think that in Australia and wherever it is around the world, I think people just don't see that in their face on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I'm very fortunate. My wife and I are very fortunate. We have insurance, health insurance, but there's a lot of people that don't. And if you're in that position, that's not where you want to be. And so I don't think the Democrats are necessarily looking to bring that in straight away, but I think that is something that over time they would look to do. So I think from a social perspective, that would be great. I think that it's such a complex, like the US political system, and but I think just overall, the US is a very complex society, and there's so much structural and just years of change that's required. And yeah, I think that people in Australia just probably don't understand or appreciate how lucky they really do have it.
No, I think that's a fair comment. Having been through what you've been through over the course of the last 6 months with this pandemic, what leadership lessons have you taken from that?
Yeah, honestly, I think that just leading by example and being true to your values, like, it's so important. And so be a leader worth following, build a culture that your employees and customers alike are proud of. And I think that what I've really learned is over the past 3 years in particular, like, the more you want to bite off in life, the more you have to embrace being uncomfortable, and that you've just got to be living in that uncomfortable or outside of your comfort zone. And so I think all of those things, like starting a business, and I mean, I haven't even mentioned, like, we've become parents in the last 2 months. So you throw that into the middle, and thank you. So starting a business, living through the pandemic from a business point of view and a personal point of view, having a child, like, I felt so far outside of my comfort zone that I think my threshold has certainly increased. And then, but overall, and this doesn't necessarily, is not just relevant to leadership, but I think having that mindset of always wanting to listen and learn and improve is so important, because again, there's been so many things that have happened where if you're not listening and learning and trying to improve, you're just going to fall by the wayside. And I don't think there is a magic formula or a rule book of how to do things. You just have to, unfortunately, sometimes experience it, and you've got to try different things, and they might not always work, but you've just got to problem solve and find a way to get things done. And so, yeah, I mean, that is what it is in terms of leadership, but you've got to take it on board yourself. Like, you'll get a lot of information, you'll get a lot of people telling you what to do, but ultimately it sits with you, and you're the one who's got to make those decisions. And you might not always get it right, but you've got to be comfortable with the decisions you've made, and just get on with it.
Yeah. So it seems like leadership, tough decision making, adaptation through pivot, and agility and speed around all of those things really are the key themes for how you've approached the last 6 months, and I guess the learnings that you'll take into the next 6-12 months as well. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. And like, honestly, I just don't be afraid to try something. Like, it's like, it doesn't matter whether it's you personally or the business. Like, you've got to always be looking to improve and always looking for a different angle, because someone else is doing exactly that every day. So you've got to be doing that as well. But
still keeping your banker hat on and managing the downside risk.
True. I feel like I'm much less of a banker than what I was, but I feel much more entrepreneurial and willing to try things. And but as you say, certainly trying to protect the downside. I don't want to be responsible for blowing
the thing up. No.
Yeah. So,
fantastic. Well, Brendan, look, thank you very, very much for your time. Really appreciate your insights. We look forward to the next conversation, which will be happening next week. But in the meantime, again, thank you, Brendan, and all the best over there.
Thanks, Hugh. Cheers.
Take care.